A friend had once told me that he really wanted to see a Bigfoot. Then, maybe 2 or 3 years later, while headed into the neighboring town to do some shopping, we drove past a group of people stopped on the side of the highway. We weren't sure if they were all together or just random people pulled off the side of the road at the same time. It just seemed odd that so many people were gathered at the same time in that spot. The weather was maybe in the 70s with a clear blue sky, and if my memory serves me, it was probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We both commented on the spectacle of seeing so many people and wondered what was happening. Nevertheless, we continued driving for another several miles to a small grocery store. There, we both got what we needed and then headed back home. This time, as we approached the crowd, we pulled over. I told him I was going to take some photos of the beaver dam that was located off to the side. Fortunately, there wasn't anyone in that area, so I was free to take my time photographing the felled trees, flooding, and the beaver dam itself. My friend, however, walked right into the mess of people. Apparently, some were from a single family, while the others had just pulled over for a break and to stretch their legs. We were probably there about 10 minutes when I thought to cross the river below the beaver dam and see what was in the woods. I heard a voice tell me not to, so I stopped halfway across the river and retreated back towards my vehicle. That's when I saw my friend standing next to a woman on the riverbank. He was pointing into the woods on the other side of the river. I didn't bother with the walk in their direction and decided to instead review my photos while waiting inside the Jeep. After another 5 to 10 minutes, he returned and we headed home. Fast forward 3 whole years. He was visiting family in Florida, and I was still in my small mountain town. He called and said, "There's something I need to tell you." His words were strange, as he's never said that before. I wondered what was to follow. "Remember that day we pulled off to see what everyone was doing?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "Well, while you were taking pictures of the beaver dam, I walked along the riverbank while looking down into the river for potential fishing holes. Do you remember?" "Yes." "At one point, I looked up and across the river into the woods, and I think I saw a Bigfoot." Now shocked, I said, "What?" "It was standing behind a tree and moving or swaying its upper body from side to side while watching me. When I realized it was staring at me and we made eye contact, I pulled my head down and looked away, thinking to myself, oh shit. Wait, that was 3 years ago and you're just now telling me." "Yeah." I didn't know what to say. "What else happened?" I asked. "Well, after looking away for a moment, I lifted my head and looked back towards it. It had moved in just a brief second or two to my right, say 50 feet or more, and was shaking a tree. That tree looked to be about 12 to 14 inches in diameter. The whole tree was swaying as it rocked it with just its arms." "What do you mean, its arms?" "It grabbed the tree and shook it. You know, without using its entire body to force the tree to move. There was also a woman nearby that I called over to ask if she could see it too." "Right. I remember seeing her beside you as you pointed into the woods." "Yeah, that's when I asked her if she saw it." "What did she say?" "Well, she just stood there for a moment, then asked me if that was my friend. Evidently, she saw us pull up and exit the Jeep, so she had seen you." He continued, "After I answered that you weren't 9 feet tall and all black, she paused for a second while trying to comprehend what she was seeing. She finally asked, 'Is that a Bigfoot?' He turned towards her and said that he didn't know. When they looked back across the river, it was gone." "I can't believe you didn't tell me about this for 3 years, especially after saying you wanted to see one." "I know. I needed time, I guess, to think about what I really saw and if it really was a Sasquatch," he replied. That's the end of his encounter, but I'd like to add something to his overall experience. Whenever he was in town visiting during the 3 years since having this experience and before telling me about it, he'd crash at my place. Before going to bed each night, I downloaded several Bigfoot encounter stories from different YouTube channels and set them to play on my computer in the living room. Some of them were over an hour long and he'd listen to them while crashed on the couch. I can't say how many hours in all he consumed of other people's Bigfoot encounters, but I think they all helped him cope with the trauma of what shocked his beliefs that day. Even after he returned to Florida, he continued to listen to people's stories, and that gave him the courage and confidence to tell me what he experienced that day. Though it was a non-threatening encounter, it still shook him to his core and challenged his beliefs. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, he searched his memories of any other times he may have experienced Bigfoot activity, namely, while deer hunting on his family farm in Indiana. This was prompted by many of the Bigfoot show call-ins he listened to by fellow hunters. For example, he recalls the time he heard what he always thought was a smack on water by a beaver's tail, but now wonders if it was a tree knock on a tree from Sasquatch. His mind told him it was probably just a beaver, even though he knew they didn't have beaver. Then there's the tree falling close to him while he was perched silently in his tree stand listening for deer. He said it was so loud and close, it sounded like a huge tree crashing to the ground. It really startled him, as he didn't hear anyone else out there with him, and it was so sudden. When he was done hunting for the day, he climbed down from his tree stand and went in search of the tree. To this day, he's never found it, and that's confused him. Hearing other people call into Bigfoot podcasts and YouTube shows to detail their strange run-ins with Bigfoot or dog men is helping to make sense of many memories he's had over the years while hunting.